Welcome to the Nicholas 11x12 technology. Today I'm looking at a very interesting high-end monitor. It's the EIZO FlexScan EV2455 24.1 inch IPS LED monitor. It was released not too long ago, and right now, at the time of this video, this display currently costs around $490 to $500 US. Yes, this indeed isn't a cheap monitor, but it certainly has lots of features to offer, which we'll take a look at in this review here today. By the way, EIZO really stands behind their product with a long 5-year warranty. A huge thank you to EIZO for sending me this expensive monitor to review. But now let's get started. The monitor comes securely packaged in this box with styrofoam. In the box is a setup guide, a couple pages of precautions, and the CD with a user's manual on it. As for the cables, included of course is the power cord, a DisplayPort cable, very nice of EIZO to include one by the way, and last but not least an USB 3.0 cable for the USB 3.0 hub on the monitor. The EV2455 pretty much is ready to go right out of the box. All you have to do is attach the stand to the display. EIZO has sent me the black version, but there also are gray and white versions available. Right away I have to say this EIZO monitor is quite heavy with approximately 6.5 kilograms. But don't get me wrong, I love it when modern LCD displays are heavy, because most of the time the quality overall is much better than on displays that are lightweight. Now before I go into detail, let's bring up the specifications first. First of all, this is an IPS anti-glare LCD panel. This means we can expect accurate color reproduction here, and since this is a matte display, no annoying reflections. An LED backlight is used of course, and the size of the screen is 24.1 inches, that are about 61 centimeters. The native resolution of this display is 1920 by 1200, with an aspect ratio of 16 by 10. This monitor supports a lot more resolutions and has a special feature called dot by dot, to which we'll get a little bit later. This EV2455 features a color depth of 8-bit, which means this monitor can display up to 16.77 million colors. The typical response time would be 5 milliseconds, which is decent for an IPS display. This monitor has refresh rates of 55 to 76 Hz analog and 59 to 61 Hz digital. The viewing angles are 178 degrees horizontal as well as 178 degrees vertical. The EV2455 has a max brightness level of 300 candela per square meter and a static contrast ratio of 1000 by 1. As for the video signals, there's one DVI input, one HDMI, one DisplayPort and one VGA input. Pretty much all the video signals you could need. You could for instance hook this monitor up to 4 PCs and switch the display input between these. This EIZO monitor also comes with an USB 3.0 hub. There's one USB 3.0 upstream port and there are 2 downstream ports. I love the fact that EIZO uses USB 3.0 here and not 2.0. Right beside these ports is one 3.5mm audio output, so a headphone jack, and one 3.5mm audio input for the integrated monitor speakers. Yes, this monitor also comes with speakers, 1+1 watt speakers to be exact. I'll talk about the quality of these a little bit later. On the opposite side of the video inputs is the power input, 200 to 240 volts, as well as 100 to 120 volts by the way. The rated power consumption on this EIZO EV2455 is 49 watts at max, 13 watts typical, and less than 0.3 watts in standby mode. I'll check the power consumption myself a little bit later. Alright, more and more TV and monitor manufacturers go for that frameless designs, and I really like that to be honest. This EV2455 also comes with an ultra slim 1mm bezel on the sides and top with black 5.2mm borders. This doesn't just mean elegance in terms of aesthetics, but this really helps a lot when running multi-monitor configurations. On the bottom we have this bar here with the switches, sensors and indicator. That's the EcoView Sense sensor, which detects user movement in front of the monitor and shifts the power saving mode when the user is not in front of the display. Of course, this feature only works if you enable it in the menu, and not to forget, the sensitivity of the sensor can also be set in the menu. I love that feature since it actually really works. I didn't expect it to work properly to be honest. Next to the first sensor is the next one, the ambient light sensor, which detects the ambient brightness and automatically adjusts the monitor's brightness to a comfortable level. Again, this feature can be turned on and off in the menu as well. Then there are 6 touch-sensitive operation switches to navigate through the display's menu. This obviously is the power switch, and next to it is the LED power indicator. The OSD menu has lots and lots of settings to customize. I really love having so many customization possibilities, and the OSD menu is very responsive, as you can see. Even the location of the OSD menu can be changed. But now let's take a look at the ergonomic features of this EIZO EV2455. First of all, there's a nice useful handle for carrying. Another nice little feature is this cable holder here to keep the monitor cables tucked away. The core of the stand, as you can see, is out of metal, and there's this ring here with soft pads to keep the stand in place on your desk. However, this also serves a purpose. Thanks to the ring, you can do a 344-degree swivel, which indeed is very nice. The screen can also be tilted down 5 degrees and tilted up 35 degrees. The EV2455 can also be height adjusted, up to 140mm measured at a tilt of 0 degrees. Last but not least, there's also the pivot feature, 90 degrees on the left, as well as 90 degrees on the right. On the back, as you can see, there are 4 screws to remove the EIZO arm here on this monitor. The VESA standard is used here, which means there's a clearance of 100 by 100mm between the screw holes. So as long as your third-party arm supports this VESA standard, has a plate thickness of 2.6mm, and is strong enough to support the weight of this monitor, you could for sure use that third-party arm. Another thing I shouldn't forget to mention is the fact that EIZO is a Japanese manufacturer of high-end monitors, and look at that! This monitor is made in Japan, not in China. In terms of product quality, as far as my experience goes, tech products that are made in Japan have much higher quality than in other countries. And we'll see what's up with the quality now, since we'll now move on to the image quality tests. Unfortunately, I don't have any professional measuring tools, but I indeed have very sensitive eyes, as you might know, and lots of monitors get horrible ratings in my reviews, since I immediately notice backlight bleeding, display non-uniformity, and inaccuracy of colors. So you know I'm very critical when it comes to monitors, so be warned here. Let's see if this EIZO EV2455 fails my tests. First test, backlight bleeding. Pass. Pretty much no backlight bleeding at all. Very impressive. When it comes to display uniformity, not bad too. There is some non-uniformity visible here, but this pretty much is as good as it can get when it comes to uniformity anyways. Now let's do some tests with the Lagom LCD monitor test images. First, a quick contrast test. All 32 bands should be distinguishable from each other and from the background. And they all without a doubt are, so far so good. Next is the gradient test, or also known as banding test. The gradient should be smooth without vertical lines or bands here. If I look very closely, there are some bands visible here, but you could pretty much call that 0. Next, a black level test. All 20 squares should be distinguishable from the background, preferably without visible noise. And I totally see all the squares and luckily no noise at all. Now a white saturation test. Again, all squares should be distinguishable from the background. Unfortunately, the last one isn't really visible to me. Not a big deal though in this test. Good. As for the gamma, it's totally fine on this monitor. I have no complaints. The final test here is the clock/face calibration image, which makes many monitors produce noises for the user to hear. With this EV2455, there's pretty much no noise to hear at all, only a tiny little bit if I get very near to the screen with my ear. The viewing angles are really good, even for an IPS display. And there's only very little of that famous so-called IPS glow visible. The next discipline is response time and ghosting. For that, we're of course going to run the classic measuring software pix/an. The response time of this monitor is 5 milliseconds, which is not bad at all for an IPS panel. Therefore, there's really not much ghosting going on here, so this isn't just an office or video and photo editing monitor. It can also be used for gaming without any problems. At least to me, 5 milliseconds really aren't an issue. 8 milliseconds would be too slow, but 5 is what I'd call good. Now it's finally time to show you the dot-by-dot screen resolution feature. This EV2455 supports a lot of resolutions, and normally when you set these resolutions in your operating system, the smaller resolution that you choose, for instance, gets stretched and also is displayed full screen. However, this is where the dot-by-dot feature comes in. Just make sure to run a supported resolution and select dot-by-dot in the signal settings of the menu. This then really, as the name already tells us, doesn't stretch the image, but displays the dots, also known as pixels on a monitor. This of course only applies to resolutions smaller than the native one, which is 1920 by 1200. But let's not forget the integrated 1+1 watt speakers on this monitor. I'll let you listen a couple seconds. Yeah, the quality isn't really good. It reminds me a lot of cheap smartphone speakers, especially once you crank up the volume. I mean, these speakers on a monitor are still usable, but not really a pleasure to listen to in my opinion. I've heard better ones on monitors. But then again, you don't buy a monitor for the speakers. Image quality is what counts, and this is where this EIZO EV2455 delivers. The speakers just seem to be a bit of an extra feature here. And now to the final test here with this monitor, the power consumption. I set the brightness level on this display to 45, which is not too bright and not too dark for my own personal use. As you can see, the monitor consumes about 11 watts here, and EIZO said in the specifications 13 are typical. So that's even less than EIZO specified. They did not lie to us. Some monitor manufacturers unfortunately tend to do so when it comes to typical power consumption. With the brightness set to 0, about 6 watts are consumed. Now once I crank the brightness level up to 100, the monitor consumes about 20 watts here, which indeed is not much at all. So for sure, this EIZO EV2455 is an extremely efficient monitor. And if you enable the power saving features in the menu, you could save even more power in the long run. The EIZO FlexScan EV2455 is an absolutely fantastic monitor. The image quality is phenomenal, no grainy pixels whatsoever, and a very precise image. The color accuracy is very good. The aspect ratio of 16 by 10 might be a little unusual, but with a resolution of 1920 by 1200, a little more pixels on the height in comparison to 1080, you get a bit more working space overall, especially when it comes to video editing. This monitor also is extremely efficient and doesn't consume much power at all. The price point of $490 to $500 is a bit tough, but if you have that much money to spend on a monitor, then this EIZO EV2455 seems to be a brilliant choice. It's a bit hard to say whether this monitor is worth the $490 to $500 or not, but right now I'd say it is. Especially because there's apparently no reason to be afraid of quality issues regarding this model. But of course, you might think differently. EIZO, however, really stands behind their product with a long 5-year warranty. I myself simply love that monitor and will for sure use it for my own personal use. That's where quality is very important to me. I'd definitely recommend this EIZO FlexScan EV2455 24.1 inch IPS LED monitor. It's just phenomenal. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and visit niklas11x12techx.com to see videos there earlier than on YouTube. Also say no to ad blockers in order to support me and to make future videos possible. Thank you.